guys, welcome back to my channel, The Inked Reader, and today I am gonna do my August wrap-up. Now, if you've watched my TBR, you know that I was away for 3 weeks in August and I couldn't take many books with me just due to logistics, basically. So I had planned to read 5 books during the holiday, and I actually ended up reading in total in over a month just 4 books. Now, it is very bad, I agree, but they were very big books. And also, I did read just 4, but I am mostly done with a couple of more. So I'm not gonna read through the statistics just because I found that usually my wrap-ups are quite long, and if I go through the statistics, I spend like around 3 to 4 minutes talking about them, so I prefer to just put them on the screen. But I do want to clarify that the page count you're going to see in a second, or that you're seeing right now, is included to a book that I've read the majority of this month. Usually I don't do that. Usually I put the page count for all the books, for only the books I've completed. The only reason why I'm making this exception this month is just because this book is humongous. It's huge. It's probably the biggest book I own, or among the top 5, and so the fact that I read the majority in August, I thought it was deserving of going to the page count for August. So also to make me feel not that shit about myself for how little I actually read. Without further ado, I'll go through the books I'm in the middle of, and then I'll go with actually 4 books that I did finish. So the book that I mentioned that's humongous, and then I put the page count, although I've not done with it completely yet, it's The Kind of Antichrist by Alexandre Dumas. This is part of my European TBR, which I'm reading a book by an author for each country in Europe before moving on to another continent. And I have read actually 918 pages in August, and I thought, for this time, let me put the page count in there. So yes, I will just put these pages in my September count, so I'm not gonna cheat in that sense. But yeah, I've read the majority of these. The other book that I actually brought with me on holiday, but I never actually got around to even read, apart from a couple of chapters, was A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. And this was a random TBR jar pick from July, I believe, and I am gonna attempt again this month, and if it doesn't work, I'm just gonna DNF these. Nothing wrong with these, it's just not piquing my interest at the moment. But I mean, I've not read much to judge. Then I did brought with me Parasite Eve, which is my Japanese horror pick for August it was, and I'm 75% through it. I'm reading these on my Kindle / my phone on my commute, so I'm mostly done with it, and so I'm gonna discuss this at the end of September. And the 2 other books that I was planning to read once I got back, but I also planned to have my thesis done by then, and of course it's not even done now, it's September. So were Unseen Academicals by Terry Pratchett, part of my Discoworld TBR, and also The Devil's Knot, which is my true crime pick for this month. And I am really, I've just started both, I'm enjoying so far both, so I will definitely continue on in September. And this is the story of a Memphis 3. This is just to say that yes, I didn't get around to finish the majority of the books that I was planning to in August, but I did at least start them, all of them. So the first book that I actually have brought with me on holiday and I actually completed was The Once and Future Witches, and this was my book club pick for one of the 2 groups. And you can find the rules of my book club. I'm the host and creator of the company that I work for, book club, and so far it's quite successful. We're having fun, and we choose 2 books every 2 months to read, and this was one choice. This is the story of 3 sisters living during the 19th century, and they become separated after tragedy struck. At the beginning you see the sisters that come back together, and they have to reclaim their family tradition, which is being witches, and the witches are not really a thing at the beginning of the book. They are persecuted and they're just not very much around. However, although they're not in the face of people, there's a lot of witching going on in the background. I categorize these as a low fantasy, and I stand by that choice. Although I absolutely love the cover, it's so beautiful, I am actually pretty conflicted about this book. meaning that I did like the writing, and I think this is such a powerful feminist book with such powerful messages throughout, beautiful quotes. I was very regretful that I forgot to pick and bring with me my post notes, because I would have tapped the shit out of these. But said that, unfortunately, I didn't like the plot, and I found the plot very bland. And I don't understand if it was the whimsical writing that kind of pulled me more toward the characters, but still not enough to make me love to such a point where I forgot about the plot altogether and I didn't care. I still like the characters enough, they were okay, but just one sister actually piqued my interest, and she was just a portion of the story. So I think, I don't know, I love the quotes, I love the writing. I would still suggest these, especially if you like feminist book, and if you like to integrate that with fantasy elements, and also if you like anything that has to do with magic. But I don't know if I would suggest this for people that love witches book in general. I found the magic it was definitely there, but it was definitely not the witchy book you would expect. Witchcraft was more of a statement than an actual craft. It's concrete, but in a way that it doesn't feel much concrete. So I read books about witches where, you know, magic powers and all that was all fascinating and what was the story was about. And instead here, I think witching and witchcraft is used to give out a message. I love the message, but I don't know, I was expecting something more witchy, which is weird to say, because if you read these, there is definitely witchcraft in it. I don't have the words to express my disappointment in certain parts of this book, apart from the words that I already said. I gave this 3 stars, and it's very weird because usually if I like the writing and the quotes, I tend to give like higher ratings despite the plot. So I don't know why I hated it particularly. I did feel like something I already read a million times. Then I have read and finished on holiday in the 3 weeks I was away, Dead House Gate by Steven Erikson. This is almost 1,000-word book, so this was an achievement. This was part of my TBR for the fantasy subgenre, where I'm reading a book in every subgenre of fantasy, and this was the chunkiest, among the chunkiest. Brandon Sanderson book is the chunkiest one, but this was second place. So I'm so glad that actually I tackled this beast. This is the second book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, so I'm not gonna give a synopsis of these. However, I definitely was of the belief that this took place hundreds of years after the events of book number 1, which is Gardens of the Moon, and I was very much mistaken. So I actually postponed reading these, and I should have read these way sooner, because I had to go online and find the synopsis for the first book because so many things I had forgotten. This is also dark fantasy, so it's definitely adult, full of violence and blood. Not much sexual content, at least not in the first 2 books, but definitely a lot of violence. And I enjoyed this. I gave this 4 stars. I will remember somehow that I loved the first book more, which is weird because usually I hear amazing things about these. Like for many fantasy reviewers that I read or follow, I always hear this is the best, this is my favorite, and blah blah blah. I actually prefer the first one. I can remember that I just prefer the first one. Although I don't remember precisely what is in the first one, I did remember at the end being more happy with it. I also realized that traveling fantasy is not my cup of tea, and this is very much a traveling fantasy. So you got all different cast of characters that you follow, and they all are traveling somehow in a form or the other. And I just don't like traveling books. Like, they bore me. And definitely you got a million names in it. The magic politics in these are all very complex. The world building is very layered and complex. So because I forgot everything about Garden of the Moon, I struggled more than in one place. Plus I would have struggled anyway because there are a million names you have to follow, and some names are quite similar, so I would confuse the two, which is not helpful. And also part of this I had no idea what the fuck was going on, basically, because of such the religion and the magic and all of that. I was just like, whoa. I was a bit lost. Said that, I loved how brutal it was. I still like the characters. I still like the journey we go on. I still like the ending enough, and I will definitely continue on. And I've learned my lessons, and I'm not gonna makes so much time pass between this and the third book, which I think it takes place with another cast of characters in another part of the continent, so it's simultaneously going on, the events in the third book and the events in this book. So for start, I will definitely continue on. Then when I came back home, I finished Columbine, and this was my true crime pick from July that I didn't get around to finish just because, again, it was a huge book. And this is the story of Columbine. Columbine is a famous high school where in 1999, on the 20th of April, 2 pupils in Columbine High School planned and carried on an attack that left 13 deaths, 11 innocent victims, and the boys killed themselves. So this was recounted by a journalist that actually, I think, attended the massacre site, and pretty much as soon as it happened, he was there in those horrible moments. And I think it took him years and years to actually put together the book and move past the depression and the aftermath of the tragedy before he could write this book. And I'm so grateful that he did write this book. From the writing side to the message, I absolutely love this. I give this 5 stars. If you are into true crime, this is definitely one that you don't want to miss. I did appreciate a lot what the author does, and I'm gonna get in a bit more details in here. If you don't hear any spoilers, you can skip ahead to the next book. But I think one major thing that the author starts with and by the end get the answer to is why did Columbine happen. And it's incredibly harrowing and at the same time eye-opening, seeing the journalist and some of the people involved coming to the conclusion that there was no why. Like, you had a psychopath and a depressed youth that decided to commit a horrible act just because of the fame. There are some instances, and they are extremely rare, where people that suffer from depression do commit mass murder before committing suicide. It's been registered before, and there are very famous stories before about people that suffer from depression do that. And of course there are people that are just psychopaths and do that. You follow along the journey of the journalists and other people involved, realizing that there is not really a why, that this was not really something that could have been prevented. Yes, the parents could have, gotten into the room, find the journals or whatever, but you tend also to think that for a 17 years old or like teens in the later teenagehood, as these 2 boys were, the parents would respect their privacy at the same time and not just barge in their room and check their diaries. Like, it's not something you do, and the kids both didn't give any signs that something was very wrong. Like, you should have been very much a professional with probably a 6th sense to realize that these 2 were gonna do that. Like, it was not something you could really honestly objectively predict in all likelihood. And all the rage, which is perfectly understandable from the parents of the victims, it's about why this happened, or whether what was something that was it bullying, and it wasn't bullying. And I think that's another thing that it does, that people that are there was a lot of misconception about why Columbine happened, and a lot of people saying, oh, these 2 kids were bullied and then they took their revenge, they had enough, which was absolutely not fucking true at all. Like, this has nothing to do with bullying. Like, actually, probably Eric, one of the 2 boys, was the one bullying sometimes others. So this has nothing to do with bullies. The idea of, you get bullied and then you become violent, because it's a very wrong idea to have. And also, it does perfectly clearly says these 2 boys just did it because they wanted to, and there is no big picture, there is no mystifying and perfectly clear answer. There is no actually answer to why. Like, the why, once you read these and you read through the journals, which are, he includes it at the end, and you explore what happened from the first time they programmed this attack to when they carried it out, the reasons were just silly, like, they're just stupid. So it's very sad at the same time, but because 11 innocent people lost their lives because of this, and so it's incredibly sad. And finally, I want to mention another thing that I truly appreciated about David, we are first name basis apparently, that he also says the media are a problem. Like, the media, the way we treat these tragedies and we feed on them and we feed those back to people, and how we create these monsters that at the same time a lot of people end up idolizing and seeing as someone to imitate. We are part of a problem as journalists, as the media. The media is part of the problem, and we should stop protecting ourselves behind the you're just recounting events or weather, because actually they are doing a lot of damage. The fact that David said we have to be accountable for some of these to a certain degree, and I do agree. He said we should stop glamorizing the killers. We should literally not even put their name on, or just mention them very briefly, and then focus all our attentions on the victims. Now, of course, it's not very doable always, because at the same time, if you are a researcher or a doctor or a psychiatrist, psychologist, or whatever, it is important that you do understand people like Eric and Dylan, the perpetrators. But it's not something that it should be fed to the general population without being careful what you say, or without making them into these inverted idols, as I call them. At the end of the day, they were an exception. Unfortunately, we started a trend about school violence that from there got worse and worse. Just such a layered topic that I could spend hours on, and I think I've talked about this enough on here. But I did appreciate this a lot. It made me think, it made me realize a lot of things, it made me realize that sometimes there is no answer, and I have to just accept it. And yeah, I will definitely check out more by him if he ever comes out with other books. But yeah, 5 stars. And finally, the last book I've read was Red Rising. I categorize this as YA sci-fi. It's also considered dystopian, I think, but I went with sci-fi because it's also considered a sci-fi. So this is a very popular series that I'm like ages behind in reading. The only reason why actually I got around to read these, quote unquote read, is because I found that on Script and I listened to the audiobook. I had started it months ago, left it, and then I kept hearing a lot of people praising book number 2 and 3 and just saying like, I'm missing out, I should listen to these or whatever. So I pushed through. I didn't mind it. I think I knew that this was the weakest book in the series, so that helps a lot. I did like how brutal it was. I think it doesn't shy away as a YA. I mean, it doesn't read as a YA, I agree with this comment, but it's still a YA. Don't quote me on this, but I've read online that it's still considered a YA. I appreciate how brutal it was, and it kept me entertaining. It's definitely dystopian, not my cup of tea. And Darrow, I mean, I'm not loving him as a character so far, but I kind of respect him, if it makes sense. So I give this 3.75 stars. I will at one point continue on. However, I've got the feeling that I should really read them physically rather than listening on audiobook. So I might give physical book a try if I find that for cheap. And yeah, that was my wrap up. Thank you for listening. I actually had the occasion, since I had just 4 books, to delve a bit more into my true crime, and I don't know, I started talking, and then, which was nice for once. And I'm gonna go, and I wish you a good day, night, depending where you are, and I'll see you next time. Ciao.